It was a busy Friday evening at one of the most elegant restaurants in downtown Chicago. The chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 tiny suns, and the air was filled with the soft clinking of glasses, the quiet hum of conversation, and the sweet aroma of roasted garlic and fresh bread. Every table was occupied by people dressed in expensive clothes, laughing, celebrating, and living their best lives. Moving quickly between the tables was Lena, a young waitress in her late 20s. Her dark hair was tied neatly in a bun, and her uniform, though a little worn, was spotless. She wore a tired smile, the kind that hides exhaustion behind professionalism. Her feet ached from hours of standing, but she kept moving, tray in hand, always polite, always calm. To most people there, she was invisible. Just another server refilling glasses and taking orders. But behind her polite smile was a woman with dreams, fears, and a story that no one in that room could imagine. Lena had once dreamed of being a concert pianist. Music had been her entire world when she was younger. She studied classical piano in college and spent endless nights practicing until her fingers hurt. But life had other plans. When her mother was diagnosed with a chronic illness, Lena had to give up school to help pay for medical bills. The piano, once her voice, became a silent reminder of what she lost. Now, she spent her days working at the restaurant and her nights at the hospital, sitting beside her mother's bed, reading to her softly. That evening, Lena had been assigned to one of the most demanding tables, Table 17. A group of wealthy businessmen had reserved it, and the staff already whispered warnings about them. "They're picky," one of the waiters told her before the shift started. "One wrong move and they'll call the manager." Still, Lena took the assignment without hesitation. She needed the extra tips. At the center of the group sat Richard Hale, a man everyone in the city seemed to know. He was a self-made millionaire, or so the newspapers said. He owned several tech companies and had a reputation for being bold, confident, and, according to most of the staff, impossible to please. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Lena's rent for 6 months. His gold watch gleamed every time he raised his glass. When Lena approached their table for the first time, she did so with her usual calm. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lena, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Richard looked up from his phone for a brief second and gave her a quick glance. "Fine," he said flatly. "Just don't mess up the order." His tone was sharp, the kind of voice that didn't need to shout to feel condescending. She nodded politely, writing down their requests as the group continued talking loudly about stocks, investments, and new business deals. It was a language of money, cold, fast, and far removed from the world Lena lived in. When she returned with their drinks, one of the men was laughing at a joke Richard had told. "You should have seen his face when I told him to sell," Richard was saying, leaning back in his chair. "Some people just don't belong in business. They belong behind the counter, not behind the desk." Lena set the wine glasses down carefully, pretending not to hear. She had mastered the art of silence, of being present but invisible. But as she poured Richard's wine, a few drops spilled onto the white tablecloth. It was barely noticeable, but Richard saw it. He raised an eyebrow, leaning forward with a smirk. "Well," he said loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear, "I suppose that's what happens when people without talent try to do skilled work." Lena froze for a split second. Her cheeks flushed red, but she quickly grabbed a napkin and dabbed at the tiny spot. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll fix that right away." The group chuckled. One of them muttered, "Don't worry, she's probably new." Lena forced a polite smile. "No, sir, not new. Just human." Richard gave a short, mocking laugh. "Touché, I'll give you that. Still, maybe you should stick to something simpler. Like washing dishes." She didn't reply. Years of experience had taught her that arguing never ended well. Instead, she gave a calm nod and walked back to the service area, her hands shaking slightly. Behind her, she could still hear their laughter. In the back room, she took a deep breath and leaned against the counter. Her coworker, an older waitress named Grace, noticed her expression. "He said something rude, didn't he?" Lena shrugged. "It's fine. People like him, they don't see us as people. Just uniforms," Grace sighed. "Ignore him, honey. He's got money but no manners. You've got Grace, and that's worth more." Lena smiled faintly. "Thanks, I'll be fine," and she was, at least on the outside. Inside, her chest felt heavy. She wasn't angry, not exactly, just tired. Tired of being looked down upon, tired of struggling. tired of pretending that she didn't still dream of the piano that now sat covered in dust at her mother's house. When she returned to the dining area, she carried herself with quiet dignity. The restaurant was getting louder now, people laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating life. The live piano music in the corner was missing that night. The pianist who usually played had canceled last minute, and the manager was worried. "Lena," he called softly as she passed by, "we'll have to go without music tonight. Can you tell your tables?" "Of course," she said, but part of her heart ached at the thought. She missed the sound of piano keys filling the air. A few minutes later, as she served the main course to Richard's table, one of his friends noticed the empty piano in the corner. "No music tonight?" he asked. The manager, who happened to be passing by, explained quickly. "Our pianist had an emergency. We couldn't find a replacement in time." Richard smirked, swirling the wine in his glass. "A fancy place like this and no music? That's a shame." The manager nodded nervously. "We'll make up for it with excellent service." As he walked away, Richard turned to his friends. "You know, music isn't that hard. Anyone can learn to play a few notes if they have time." Lena, standing nearby, felt her stomach twist. She couldn't help but glance at the piano. Memories flashed through her mind. Her mother sitting in the audience at her first recital, her fingers trembling as she played her favorite nocturne, the applause that made her believe she could make it someday. But that someday never came. When she came back to refill their glasses, one of Richard's friends, slightly drunk, said with a laugh, "Hey Lena, I heard you were talking about the piano earlier. You play?" Lena blinked, surprised. "I used to," she said quietly. Richard looked up with sudden interest. "You used to?" he said, his tone dripping with amusement. "What stopped you? Couldn't afford it?" There was no kindness in his voice. It was a challenge disguised as a joke. The other men laughed awkwardly. Lena kept her eyes steady. "Something like that," she replied softly. Richard smirked. "Well, maybe you can give us a little show. You know, make up for the missing pianist." The table laughed again, thinking it was just teasing, but Richard leaned back, clearly entertained by his own cruelty. "Go on," he added mockingly. "Prove me wrong. Let's see if there's any real talent hiding under that apron." For a second, time seemed to stop. Lena felt the weight of every eye on her. The room was still filled with chatter and laughter, but around that table everything seemed quiet. Her heart beat faster. She could walk away, pretend she hadn't heard him. That would be the easy thing to do. But somewhere deep inside, something stirred, something she hadn't felt in years. She set down her tray slowly, her fingers brushing the cool surface of the table. "If it's all right with the manager," she said calmly, "I could play one song, just for tonight." The laughter at the table faded into silence. Richard raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You're serious?" She nodded. "Yes." The manager, hearing the exchange, hurried over. "Lena, are you sure? You don't have to—" "It's fine," she said gently. "Just one song." Richard leaned back with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "This should be interesting," he said, crossing his arms. As Lena walked toward the piano, the soft light of the chandeliers glinted off the polished black surface. Her hands trembled slightly, but her steps were steady. She hadn't touched a piano in years, but her heart remembered. Around the room, people began to notice. Conversations quieted. Glasses were set down. Even the kitchen staff peeked through the doorway. No one knew what to expect. And as Lena sat down, her reflection caught in the piano's glossy lid, she took a deep breath and closed her eyes. In that single breath, the restaurant, the tables, the laughter, the mockery, all of it faded away. It was just her and the keys. What no one knew was that the next few minutes would change everything. For her, for the people watching, and even for the man who had laughed at her just moments ago. The restaurant grew quiet as Lena sat down at the piano. The air seemed to hold its breath. A few people turned their heads to watch, whispering to each other. Most had no idea what was about to happen. They just saw a waitress still in her apron, sitting in front of a grand piano meant for professionals. Lena rested her hands gently on the keys. Her fingers trembled slightly. It had been years since she had played in front of anyone. She could still remember the weight of her last performance in college, the proud smile on her mother's face, the applause that followed, and then the silence of everything that came after. She pushed the memories aside and focused on the piano. For a moment, she did nothing, The restaurant lights reflected softly on the black surface of the piano. Then she pressed a key, just one note. It echoed faintly, pure and fragile. Another note followed, and then another, until the room was filled with a quiet melody that made even the loudest tables pause mid-conversation. It was a song she used to play when life was still kind. A piece by Chopin, gentle but strong, full of emotion. Her fingers began to move faster, each note flowing into the next like water. The melody rose and fell like a heartbeat, steady, emotional, alive. Richard sat back in his chair, his mocking smile fading. He had expected clumsy noise, not this. The same waitress he had laughed at minutes earlier now looked like someone else entirely. Her eyes were closed, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm, as if she was not just playing the music but living it. Around the restaurant, everything changed. The waiters stood still, holding trays mid-air. Conversation stopped. Even the clinking of cutlery faded. The only sound was the piano, and Lena's soft, steady breathing between phrases. Her music told a story of struggle, loss, and hope. Every note carried emotion, and though she never spoke a word, everyone understood. When she reached the middle of the piece, her fingers began to fly across the keys with speed and precision. The audience could almost feel her heart through the music. It was as if she had opened a window into her soul and invited everyone inside. A man at the bar wiped his eyes quietly. A woman near the window held her husband's hand. The melody softened again, growing tender and sad. For a brief moment, Lena forgot she was in a restaurant. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was that young girl again, playing for her mother, chasing a dream she had buried long ago. In her mind, she could almost hear her mother's voice saying, "Don't ever stop playing, sweetheart." And for the first time in years, she truly listened. When the final note faded into silence, no one moved. The air felt different, heavier, as if everyone in the room was afraid that clapping might break the spell. Then one person began to applaud. Another joined. And soon the entire restaurant was on its feet, cheering and clapping, their faces lit with amazement. Lena opened her eyes slowly, startled by the sound. She smiled shyly, her cheeks pink. She didn't know what to do with the sudden attention. She stood, bowed slightly, and returned to her tray, trying to disappear into the background again. But it was too late. People were already taking videos on their phones. They whispered her name to the manager, asking where she learned to play like that. Richard, still seated, stared at her in silence. His expression was unreadable, part shock, part embarrassment. For the first time in a long while, he had nothing clever to say. His friends were whispering too, their voices filled with awe. "Did you know she could play like that?" one of them asked him. Richard shook his head slowly. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't." Lena continued working as if nothing had happened. She cleared empty plates, filled glasses, and smiled politely at the guests who complimented her. Inside, though, she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. It was small but real. It was the feeling of being seen for who she truly was. Later, when the restaurant began to close and the crowd had thinned, Richard called her over. His tone was different now, quieter, less sure of itself. "That was unexpected," he said. "You play beautifully." "Thank you, sir," she replied softly. He hesitated. "Why are you working here?" Lena gave a small, tired smile. "Because life doesn't always go the way we plan. My mother's sick, and this job helps with her treatment. Playing piano doesn't pay bills, at least not yet." Richard nodded slowly, his eyes downcast. For once, he didn't have a comeback. "I see," he said simply. "It's okay," Lena added gently. "Sometimes we have to pause our dreams to take care of the people we love. That doesn't mean we stop believing in them." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He looked at her, really looked, and realized how wrong he had been. All his wealth, his power, his success, it suddenly felt small compared to the grace and strength standing before him. When she walked away to clean another table, he sat in silence. His friends were still talking about the performance, but he barely heard them. For the first time in years, he felt humbled. He thought about how easily he had judged her, and how her quiet dignity had made him question himself. As the night came to an end, Lena stayed late to help clean up. She wiped tables, stacked chairs, and finally, when everyone else was gone, she sat at the piano once more. This time there was no audience. Just her, the empty room, and the gentle hum of the city outside. She placed her hands on the keys again and played softly. The song was quieter now, slower, more personal. It wasn't a performance, it was a conversation with herself. Each note was like a sigh, a whisper of gratitude that she still had music inside her, even after all the years of silence. Richard had left, but his driver had forgotten something and returned. As he waited near the door, he heard the faint sound of the piano again. He peeked inside quietly and saw Lena playing alone. The sight moved him in a way he didn't expect. There was something pure about it, something real that money could never buy. He didn't say anything. He just stood there for a moment listening, before leaving quietly. Outside, the night air felt cool against his skin, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something like peace. Inside the restaurant, Lena finished her song, closed the piano lid gently, and whispered to herself, maybe someday. Then she turned off the lights and walked home through the quiet streets, her heart a little lighter than before. That night, she didn't know that someone had recorded her performance. She didn't know that by morning, her life would begin to change in ways she never expected. The next morning, the city woke slowly to another workday. Cars filled the streets, people rushed for coffee, and life continued as usual. But for Lena, the day felt different. She woke early, made tea for her mother, and prepared for another long shift. She had no idea that her quiet performance from the night before was already spreading across the internet. Someone had recorded her playing at the restaurant and uploaded the video online with the caption, "Waitress shocks millionaire with piano skills." By sunrise, it had already gathered thousands of views. By noon, it had reached hundreds of thousands. People were sharing it everywhere, on social media, in group chats, and even on news pages. The comments poured in, filled with words like inspiring, beautiful, and unbelievable. At first, Lena didn't notice any of it. She was busy at the hospital helping her mother with breakfast. Her mother's health had been fragile for months, but her smile was still warm. "You look tired, dear," she said softly as Lena helped her sit up. "I'm okay, Mom," Lena replied. "Just the usual long night." Her mother looked at her closely. "Did you play again?" "You have that glow you always get after you play." Lena smiled faintly. "Just for a few minutes. The restaurant's pianist canceled, and someone asked me to fill in." Her mother's eyes softened. "I'm so proud of you. I always knew you'd find your way back to the piano." Lena didn't respond. She didn't want to admit that she hadn't played in years before last night. It had felt like a dream, a small moment she didn't expect to mean anything. After helping her mother settle in, she left for her afternoon shift, unaware that her life was quietly changing online. When she arrived at the restaurant, her co-workers were buzzing with excitement. "Lena!" Grace called out as soon as she walked in. "You're all over the internet." Lena blinked. "What do you mean?" Grace grabbed her phone and turned the screen around. There it was, Lena at the piano, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys. The title read, "Waitress leaves everyone speechless." Below it were millions of views. Lena froze. "That can't be real," she said softly. "Oh, it's real," Grace laughed. "You've gone viral. People are calling the restaurant asking about you. Reporters too." Lena stared at the screen in disbelief. The comments were overflowing. Strangers from around the world were cheering for her, calling her an inspiration. Some wrote that her performance made them cry. Others said she reminded them that dreams never truly die. Her hands trembled. "I don't even know what to say." "Say you're famous," one of the other waiters teased. "Because you are." Before she could process it all, the restaurant manager came out from the office holding his phone. "Lena," he said with a wide smile. "A local news channel just called. They want to do a short interview about your story." "An interview?" she repeated, stunned. "I'm just a waitress." "Not anymore," he said warmly. "You're the waitress who played like a professional pianist in front of a millionaire." People love stories like this. She didn't know what to think. Part of her was excited, but another part was nervous. She wasn't used to attention. All she had wanted that night was to play a song, to remember what it felt like to touch the keys again. Now the whole world seemed to be watching. Later that day, a small TV crew arrived at the restaurant. They were polite and kind, setting up cameras and lights while customers watched curiously. The interviewer, a cheerful woman, smiled at Lena. "We just want to hear your story," she said gently. "How did it all happen?" Lena spoke softly, choosing her words carefully. It was just a normal night. Our pianist couldn't make it, and someone asked me to play a song. I used to study piano in college, but I had to stop when my mom got sick. That's all. The interviewer nodded. And now your video has millions of views. How does that feel? Lena smiled nervously. Strange. I never thought anyone would care about something like that. I just did what I love. The segment aired that evening, and within hours more people reached out. Musicians, talent scouts, even a local music school offering her a scholarship. It was overwhelming. For so long, Lena had been invisible, just another face in the crowd. Now people knew her name. Meanwhile, Richard was sitting in his office when his phone buzzed. One of his employees sent him a link. "Boss, isn't this the waitress from last night?" The message read. Richard opened the link and watched the video in silence. It was the same performance he had seen in person, but somehow, watching it again made him feel something deeper. The comments below the video were full of admiration, not just for her talent, but for her humility. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He remembered the way he had mocked her, the way she had stayed calm, and how she had walked to that piano with quiet courage. For the first time, he felt ashamed. He realized how small his words had been compared to her strength. That evening, he called the restaurant and asked to speak with Lena. When she answered, her voice was cautious but polite. "Hello, this is Lena." "Lena," Richard began, his tone softer than before. "It's me, Richard. I just wanted to say, I owe you an apology. I was rude and I was wrong." There was a pause. "Thank you, sir," she said gently. "You didn't have to call." "I did," he replied. "I saw the video. You have a gift. I didn't see that before. I was too busy thinking I knew everything." She smiled faintly, even though he couldn't see it. "Sometimes people just need a reminder." He chuckled quietly. "Yes, I think I needed one." Then he hesitated. "Listen, I have some connections in the music industry. If you'd ever like to play again, maybe we can help you find an opportunity." Lena was silent for a moment. "That's very kind of you, but I'm not sure yet. My mom needs me." "I understand," he said sincerely. "But if you ever change your mind, my offer stands." After the call, Lena sat quietly, staring at her phone. She didn't know what would come next, but she felt something shift inside her. For years, she had believed that her dreams were over. Now, it felt like the universe had opened a door she didn't even know was still there. Over the next few days, the attention only grew. Local magazines wanted to feature her story. A community fundraiser started to help cover her mother's medical bills. The restaurant became busier than ever, with people coming just to meet the piano waitress. One night, after closing, the manager told her, "Lena, I've been in this business for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this. You've brought hope to people. That's special." She smiled shyly. "I'm just doing what I love." As the days went by, she began to believe that maybe something good could come from all this. She started practicing again at home on her old piano, its keys still slightly out of tune. Her mother would sit nearby, listening with her eyes closed, humming along. It was peaceful, like old times. One morning, an email arrived that made her heart skip a beat. It was from a well-known music foundation. They had seen her video and wanted to invite her to audition for a special program that helped undiscovered talents return to music. They would cover her expenses and even offer support for her mother's care during the program. Lena read the message 3 times before showing her mother. "What do you think?" she asked nervously. Her mother smiled, her eyes shining. "I think it's your time, sweetheart. You gave up so much for me. Now it's time for you to play again." Tears filled Lena's eyes as she nodded. She didn't know where the journey would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. Music had found its way back to her, just when she needed it most. Lena couldn't stop thinking about the email. The Music Foundation's invitation felt like a lifeline thrown to her after years of struggle. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope, and it was bright. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the piano in the corner of her small apartment. Its keys were a little worn, the wood scratched in places, but it still held the same magic she remembered. Her mother noticed her silence. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" she asked softly. Lena nodded. "I don't know if I can do it, Mom. I haven't played in years in front of anyone like that. What if I'm not good enough?" Her mother reached over and took her hand. "Sweetheart, you've already proven that you are. Remember last week? That night in the restaurant? You played like no one else could. That was you in your full strength even after all these years." Lena smiled faintly but still hesitated. "It's just, this is a big step. Leaving work, leaving you. It feels scary." "You'll never be alone," her mother said, "and this might be your chance to finally follow your dream. You deserve this, Lena." That evening, after helping her mother settle in and making sure she had everything she needed for the night, Lena sat at the piano. She placed her hands on the keys, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. She began to play softly, carefully. At first, her fingers felt clumsy. It had been years, and the old muscles and memory needed time to wake. But as the melody continued, her confidence grew. The notes flowed more smoothly. Her hands remembered the movements naturally. By the end of the practice session, Lena was exhausted but happy. She felt alive again. Her heart raced with excitement and nerves at the same time. This was the first real step toward reclaiming a part of herself that had been buried for too long. The next morning, Lena called the Music Foundation. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke with the coordinator. I'd like to accept the invitation," she said. Her voice was soft, but steady. "I'm ready to audition." "Wonderful," the coordinator replied warmly. "We'll cover your travel and accommodations, and we'll make sure your mother is supported while you're with us. We're excited to hear you play." After the call, Lena felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She had taken the first step, but the path ahead was unknown. She spent the next few days preparing. She practiced for hours, every note deliberate, every phrase considered. She remembered the songs she loved, the pieces that had once been her signature in college. She wanted to show not just her skill, but her passion and soul. On the day of her journey, Lena packed a small bag. Her mother helped her, fussing over clothes and food, making sure she had everything she needed. "Remember," her mother said, hugging her tightly, "this is your chance to shine. Don't hold back." At the airport, Lena felt the familiar nervous energy of travel. She was leaving behind the comfort of her daily routine, the familiarity of her city, her small apartment, and her mother's care. But she also felt excitement, a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. The video of her restaurant performance had given her courage, and she carried it with her like a shield. When she arrived at the foundation's facility, she was greeted by staff who were warm and welcoming. The audition rooms were quiet, each one with a grand piano, ready for hopeful musicians to play. Lena was shown to her room where the coordinator explained the process. "Take your time. Play what feels right. We want to see who you really are through your music," she said. Alone in the room, Lena sat at the piano and exhaled slowly. She could hear her own heartbeat as she lifted her fingers. For a moment she hesitated. The room felt enormous, silent, and the weight of expectation pressed down on her. Then, she began to play. The first few notes were careful, measured. Her hands shook slightly, but gradually the music grew stronger, more confident. Each phrase carried a story: her struggles, her sacrifices, her love for her mother, her lost years, and the hope she carried for the future. The walls seemed to disappear as she poured herself into every note. The audition panel sat quietly, listening intently. They were professionals, experienced musicians, and educators, but there was something different about Lena's playing. It wasn't just about technique or perfection, it was about authenticity. Her music had lived experiences in it, and it resonated deeply. When the final note faded, silence hung for a moment. Then, one of the judges smiled, another nodded. Slowly, the panel began to clap, then all together. Lena exhaled, her heart racing, tears threatening to fall. She had done it. She had shown the truth of her soul through music. After the audition, the coordinator spoke with her. "You were incredible. Your story, combined with your music, is exactly what this program is about. We'd like to invite you to join our intensive program starting next month. This is your chance to grow, perform, and be seen." Lena felt her knees weaken. She managed to nod. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," the coordinator replied. "Your music speaks for itself." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Lena balanced preparing her mother for the transition with her own preparation for the program. She visited doctors, arranged schedules, and practiced tirelessly. She felt the pressure but also a renewed sense of purpose. Every evening at home, she would sit at her piano and play, losing herself in melodies that reminded her why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. Finally, the day arrived for her to start the program. She arrived at the center early, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves. Other participants were already there, each carrying their own story, their own struggles, and their own dreams. Lena felt a mixture of humility and excitement. The first week was intense. Classes in theory, performance, technique, and expression filled her days. Lena learned new ways to approach her music, to think about phrasing, emotion, and connection with an audience. She was challenged, sometimes pushed to the edge, but every night she returned to her room and practiced with renewed determination. In the evenings, she would call her mother. "How was your day, Mom?" she would ask. "Busy, but good," her mother would reply. "But I miss you." "I miss you too," Lena said softly. "But I'm doing this so we can have a better future. And I promise I'll come home and play for you as soon as I can." Her mother would smile, her pride shining through. "I'm so proud of you, Lena. Keep going." As the program continued, Lena began to notice changes within herself. Her confidence grew. She no longer doubted her ability. She could see the power of her music to touch people, not just in technique but in emotion. She connected with fellow participants, sharing experiences, stories, and advice. They celebrated each other's successes and encouraged one another through struggles. One day, during a practice session, a staff member approached Lena. "We're planning a small showcase for local music lovers and journalists," he said. "We'd like you to perform. Your story has inspired many already. This is your chance to shine in front of an audience." Lena felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. "An audience?" she whispered. "Yes," he said warmly. "Just think of it as another step. You've done so much already. This is just the next part." She nodded slowly. That night she practiced until her fingers ached. Every note mattered. Every phrase needed to convey not just music but emotion, her story, her journey. She wanted to show the world the woman she had become, strong, passionate, resilient. The day of the showcase arrived. The room was filled with people, friends, supporters, journalists, and local music enthusiasts. Lena walked to the piano, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. She sat down, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath, and then she began to play. The music filled the room, carrying every emotion she had experienced over the past months: fear, hope, love, loss, courage. People listened in awe. Some had tears in their eyes. Others leaned forward, captivated by the story her fingers told. Lena's music was no longer just a talent. It was a message, a bridge connecting her life to everyone in the room. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood cheering, clapping, some even wiping away tears. Lena exhaled, tears of joy streaming down her face. She had made it. Not just to perform, but to be seen, to be heard, to matter. That night, as she returned to her room, she realized something important. Life had thrown obstacles in her path, but every challenge had brought her here. Every hardship, every struggle, every quiet night of practice, it had led to this moment of triumph, of recognition, and of hope for the future. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. After the showcase, Lena felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The applause still echoed in her ears, and the warmth of the audience's appreciation filled her heart. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of accomplishment that wasn't tied to bills, responsibilities, or survival. This was pure, unfiltered joy, the kind that came from doing what she loved most. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The video of her showcase performance went online. reaching millions of people. Messages of support poured in from around the world, musicians, students, strangers inspired by her story. People shared their own struggles, their own dreams, and how her courage had given them hope. Lena was overwhelmed, but in a good way. She finally understood the impact her music could have beyond the walls of a restaurant or a small practice room. Amid the chaos, Lena kept her focus on her mother. She visited every evening, bringing stories of her day, videos of her performances, and small gifts from friends and mentors she had met through the program. Her mother beamed with pride. "You're living your dream, Lena," she said one night as Lena played a gentle melody on the old piano at home. And it's beautiful to see. Lena's journey wasn't without its challenges. The program demanded intense practice, long hours, and emotional resilience. Some days she felt she wasn't good enough, that she couldn't keep up with other talented musicians. She doubted herself, comparing her progress to those who had studied and performed continuously. But she reminded herself why she was here. For her mother, for herself, and for the music that had never left her heart. One evening, during a particularly long rehearsal, Lena received a message from Richard. He congratulated her on the showcase and mentioned that he had shared her performance with some influential people in the music industry. His tone was no longer mocking or condescending, but genuinely admiring. Lena felt a mix of surprise and gratitude. It was strange to think that the same man who had once humiliated her was now supporting her career in a sincere way. Months passed, and Lena began receiving invitations to perform at small concerts, local events, and even charity functions. Each opportunity allowed her to grow, refine her skill, and connect with audiences. She discovered a joy in performing that she had forgotten, and each note she played carried the depth of her journey. Her life had shifted from one of mere survival to one filled with purpose and passion. Then came the day she had been dreaming of for years, her first major public recital at a renowned concert hall. Lena felt nerves unlike anything she had experienced before. The hall was massive, filled with people, journalists, and music enthusiasts. She took a deep breath backstage, recalling every lesson, every practice, and every moment that had led her here. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "You've earned this, sweetheart." As she walked onto the stage, the lights illuminated her and the grand piano. The audience's quiet murmur seemed to fade as she sat down and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, Lena closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the weight of the journey she had endured. The long nights, the sacrifices, the doubts, and the fleeting moments of joy. Then she began to play. Her performance was breathtaking. Every note carried emotion, telling a story of perseverance, hope, and love. The audience was captivated, leaning forward in their seats, listening intently. Tears formed in the eyes of some, while others smiled, lost in the beauty of her music. Lena's fingers moved with precision and passion, her body swaying gently to the rhythm. She was not just playing notes, she was sharing her soul. When the final note faded, the hall remained silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone collectively held their breath. Then the applause erupted, thunderous and heartfelt. Lena stood, tears streaming down her face, and bowed deeply. She could feel the energy, the admiration, the connection with each person in the room. It was overwhelming, but it was exactly what she had dreamed of for so long. Backstage, Lena's mother hugged her tightly. "You did it, Lena. You're amazing," she whispered. Lena held her mother close, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and love. All the sacrifices, all the challenges, had led to this moment of triumph. The success of the recital opened new doors for Lena. She began receiving invitations to perform in other cities, collaborate with musicians she admired, and even record her music professionally. Despite the growing fame, Lena remained humble, always remembering where she had started. The small restaurant, the quiet nights with her mother, and the dream that had never truly died. Richard remained a supportive figure in her life, attending a few performances and offering guidance where appropriate. Their relationship transformed from one of tension and misunderstanding to mutual respect and genuine support. Lena appreciated his change, understanding that people could grow and learn from their mistakes. One afternoon, while taking a short break from rehearsals, Lena received a letter from a young girl. The girl wrote about how Lena's story and music had inspired her to continue pursuing her dream of playing piano, despite her own challenges. Lena read the letter carefully, her heart swelling with emotion. She realized that her journey had not only transformed her life, but had also touched others in meaningful ways. As the years went by, Lena's career flourished. She continued performing, teaching, and sharing her story with those who needed encouragement. She never forgot the humble beginnings, the days of exhaustion at the restaurant, or the moment a single video changed everything. Her mother's health improved gradually, and they shared many quiet evenings together, filled with music and laughter. Lena understood that success was not measured only by fame or recognition, but by the lives she touched, the joy she shared, and the courage she maintained in the face of adversity. She had learned that dreams could be delayed but never extinguished, that perseverance and love could guide one through the darkest times, and that humility and gratitude were the true markers of achievement.